Welcome to the Career-Ready Podcast. Learn about resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, interviewing, and all the things you need to be career-ready with the Career Services Center at College of DuPage. I'm one of your hosts, Michelle Malik. Later in today's episode, you will hear my interview with Hilary Chapa, who works in admissions and outreach at the College of DuPage, where she's going to talk about controlling your nerves during an interview.
And I'm another one of your hosts, Rebecca Harrington, and I will end the episode with this week's listener question submitted to our listener mailbag at careerpodcast@cod.edu about how to show a gap on your resume. But first, you'll hear from one of our other hosts, Pierre Michaels.
Thanks. I'm going to start our episode today with some information about the career-ready competency of communication. Communication is an ability we all have, but that does not necessarily mean it's a skill set one has. As a career-ready competency, NACE defines communication as clear and effective exchanging information, ideas, facts, and perspectives with persons inside and outside of an organization. While there are many components that reflect our communication abilities and effectiveness, for this episode, I want to emphasize the different forms of communication we use in the job search. The one most people think of is interviewing, but the interview is not the first or last setting we communicate in during the job search. The application, resume, and cover letter are all ways we reflect our written communication abilities. Within these documents, you want to be clear and concise. If you can't present yourself well here, the employer is already thinking you will not be able to communicate well on the job. Now fast forward to after the interview. You want to keep communication alive with your follow-up. We normally talk about the follow-up as part of professionalism and reflecting our ability to follow through, but we should not overlook the importance of effective communication here. Interview follow-up is normally in written form, but it could also be a phone call. Regardless, it needs to be personalized and engaging in a short message. This is our opportunity to reflect our ability to effectively summarize core ideas exchanged in the interview. There's so much more we could say about communication, and we will in future episodes, but I want to end on this thought. If you've taken the time to research your desired employer, make sure you share what you find. This should be through personalizing the content of your resume and cover letter and preparing talking points for the interview. If you do not take the time to communicate what you have found in your research, you are limiting your ability to showcase one of the core competencies employers value the most. And now Michelle is here with an interview.
This is Michelle, and we're here today with our special guest, Hilary Chapa. Hilary works in our admissions and outreach department at the College of DuPage as an administrative assistant. Hilary is going to share her tips, tricks, and personal experiences with how to control your nerves during an interview. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Hilary. We can't wait to hear from you.
Thanks so much for having me here today, Michelle. I'm really excited.
Yeah. How do you like all of this?
It's very new, but I would say I've learned from career services that when new experiences and opportunities to grow come up, that I take them. So even though I was nervous to try out my first podcast, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it and see what this is all about.
Yeah, well, we're here. We're excited to have you here. So the first question I want to start off with is, before getting into our main topic, could you share a little bit about yourself and how you got into your current role at the college?
Absolutely. So before coming to College of DuPage, I was an educator for about 8 years. And over time and a lot of self-reflection and work, I realized that I was eager to pursue some new opportunities. And so I actually started my journey by meeting with career services. So I had a friend who worked there, and I thought, I have no idea where I'm going or what I'm doing, and I need some structure around this journey. So that's how I came to you guys. And after working with career services for a while, I thought, wait a minute. I really love this service that's available to the community. Why don't I actually apply to College of DuPage and learn the skills I used at College of DuPage to get a job at College of DuPage? And so that is kind of how I ended up here in admissions and outreach.
I love that. And I love that you connected with us too and had a great experience.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. So to get into our topic, we all go through the interview process at some point. So I'm just curious, since that's what we're talking about today, I'm curious about your personal experiences with interviewing and how you have felt about it in the past versus now.
It's really funny to think about my journey through the interview process. So because I was an educator for 8 years and I was in the same place for 8 years. So I really didn't have a lot of experience with interviewing in my career. And so after I had done resumes with career services, they were pretty good. So I started sending them out and I started getting calls from recruiters. And I remember I got a call from a recruiter and he said, "Tell me about yourself." And I told him about how I enjoyed yoga and reading and cooking. And I realized that in that interview, as he started asking me some more specific questions, I was like, I know he's looking for specific answers, and I have zero idea what they are. And so that's kind of when I knew that I needed additional training, but I didn't know where to go or what to do. I hadn't had a lot of experience with it in the past. So that's when I said, okay, career services taught me how to do resumes, but now I need help with I can get my foot in the door, but now I need to be able to actually have an interview conversation.
Mm-hmm. I love that story that you shared because I think that's so true for a lot of people, right? Like the tell me about yourself question is so hard because you don't know what they're looking for, right? Until you've practiced it a little bit. So I appreciate you sharing that story because I think a lot of our listeners are going to be able to connect with that. So for our next question, can you talk a little bit about being a career changer and how that impacted your approach to interviewing?
Yeah, so I as I was reflecting on this question, I realized it's not been easy being a career changer. I didn't realize how much of my identity was wrapped up in my previous position in being an educator. And it's really taking me time for me to process that change. You know, it was part of my life for 8 years. And there was a lot of sadness, honestly, around changing. But also, I think what's encouraging for me now is that there's also excitement about all these different opportunities that are available. And I really do feel like the more I interview, the more I practice, the more I learn about myself, and the more excited I think, wait a minute, I'm not just I'm not just this career or that career. I now have all these tools that I can use to kind of transfer over to a lot of different careers. So it's sadness and joy at the same time. So kind of both. And my approach to interviewing has changed in that now interviews are conversations for me. It's a chance for me to see, is this a good fit for me and for you? Before, it was kind of me wanting to force, I hope they like me and they accept me and what will this all be like? But now I think, no, this is a conversation between two people or multiple people if you're on like a 5-person interview panel, which is so scary sometimes. But just to see, am I a good fit? And it's for me as much as it is for them. So that's been helpful for me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times we kind of forget that we're also interviewing the committee members, right, or our employers. And it's important to know that you're also going to enjoy working there just as much as they want to know if you're the right person for the job.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So with our next question, I just wanted to know what tips and tricks have you personally used that have helped you control your nerves before and during an interview just to survive that interview process? Because we all get nervous.
Yes, for sure. So I think one of the most helpful things for me was taking that job description and then writing interview questions. So in my experience personally, I would send job descriptions to career services, and then they would send me back possible interview questions. And so then I would use something that you guys taught me called the STARS method, and I would actually write out my answers to those questions. And depending on how much time I had to prepare, I would even use Big Interview, which is a system where I would actually speak and record myself, and then it would give me feedback on how many times I'm saying or how fast or slow I'm talking. And it would give me positive feedback too. But I think just having some structure around the interview process and having some expectations was super helpful for me. And then this is one that made me laugh, but snacks are huge for me in the preparation process. So if I don't sleep well, if I don't take some time to do some physical exercise and really make sure that I'm on my A game physically, that really will affect how I interview. So I make sure to be mindful of I can prepare a certain amount with the actual job, but the interview process, but then I also need to go take care of my other parts of life too.
Yeah, I think that's really important because you want to be on top of it during that interview. So you have to take care of your well-being, right? Now, this is a little off script, but what is your favorite interview snack? Like, what is your go-to?
So I think it would have to be either a banana.
Oh, yeah, those are good.
Or a protein bar. So something that's kind of quick that I can drink some water. And the other key is having a toothbrush. So toothbrush and toothpaste, because I don't want to go in there. You know, we all know what that's like.
Right. You want to make the best impression.
Yes. Yes.
Going back to using the STAR method in big interview, I just wanted to touch on the STAR method. So for those of you who don't know what the STAR method is, it stands for something. So S is the situation, T is the task, A is the action, and R is the result. So I love that you brought that up because you can use that during an interview to kind of keep yourself on track. So with S, you're setting up that situation. What were you doing in a specific job? T, with that task, what were you tasked to do? A, what type of action did you take to complete that task? And then R, what was the result of completing that action or that task? So I'm just curious, do you feel like it kind of using that method, did it help you stay on track in your interviews and give great, like good responses?
Absolutely. I do feel like I was more confident being able to provide those answers when I knew my material. I had studied, and that was really helpful for me in boosting my confidence. I will say I've had some though that have always thrown me for a loop. And I was thinking, that wasn't part of the job description questions. I think one time I was asked, what are your pet peeves?
Oh, my goodness.
And I was like, oh, it was a good one, though.
And I think, too, when you get questions that you haven't prepared for, it allows you to answer them. And then you can use that for the next interview, right? Like,
Yeah, understand. I think going back to that, understanding myself, because that's also a part of what Career Services really encouraged me to do. I really thought you guys were going to tell me the magical job that I was supposed to have. And what you really taught me is that I needed to go on this journey of understanding myself, what I liked and I don't like, what skills do I want to develop, what am I okay to shelve. And so then when those questions do come up sometimes that aren't really so much the start, I can't really put an action to it because I've done the work of trying to understand myself. It was really easy to answer.
Are there any resources that you found helpful to keep calm when interviewing?
Absolutely. So I think a resource that's been really helpful for me has been LinkedIn Learning. And I loved watching a lot of the videos on tips and tricks for best first impressions. And I know this was kind of silly, but I tend to get really nervous and my palms will get kind of clammy. And so they encouraged you to, if you had like a drink that especially would worsen that feeling, to hold a napkin on the inside. And so during interviews now, right before, I'll hold a napkin in between my hands and just kind of use that as a resource. And so it's all these little tips and tricks kind of even beyond all of that verbal stuff. So, and maintaining eye contact, smiling, kind of, oh yes, remember that there's more to the interview than just the answers.
Right. And I think sometimes we do forget to smile because we're so nervous, and like we're just kind of, there's so many things going on at once. So sometimes we need that reminder, right?
Absolutely.
And then also, I just wanted to ask to kind of wrap up our interview, is there any additional advice that you'd like to offer our listeners that you may have not mentioned yet?
Yeah, so I think that what's been helpful for me to remember is that I can prepare, do my very best, and then remind myself that I have no control over the outcome of an interview. And that I can be kind to myself after the interview and proud that I did take a risk, and that I can celebrate that I learned about myself from that process. So I tried to remember, no matter how an interview goes, that I learned something about myself in that process.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to remember too. And just to remember the fact that you got that far is impressive, right? And you should be proud of yourself for getting that far.
Absolutely.
I did want to mention just one thing about Big Interview. You did mention how it helped you throughout your journey and helping you interview. So for our listeners out there who aren't at College of DuPage, I would encourage you to check your local colleges and universities to see if they have an interview system as well that you could sign up for. So I just wanted to plug that real quick. because Big Interview is specific to COD, but even if you're not attending COD, you can still get access to it too. So if you are interested, you can check that out on our website. Well, thank you so much for being with us here today, Hilary. I so appreciate all of the answers that you shared and all of the tips and tricks. We are so grateful to have you here today. So again, thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. It's been a lot of fun.
So I had a really great time interviewing Hilary today. I thought it went really well. She shared a lot of great tips and tricks. I'm actually curious to hear what you all thought about it, Pierre and Rebecca.
Well, first of all, that was awesome. You did a great job, and Hilary did a great job.
Thank you.
A lot of good information.
Yeah, I know Hilary. I've worked with her, and she is such a great person. And to hear her talk about how she went through that journey and like listening to it on the other end here, I had a smile throughout that whole interview just to hear about what she's gone through, how she's grown from that experience.
So if I read that correctly, Pierre, it sounds like you were the one that she was working with. So you're like, check, check, check. She learned it all.
Well, I'm not the only one, but yes.
No, that's always so great to hear that, like, what I said, she listened. Like, that's always exciting for a career services person.
Well, so what it sounds like you're saying is you're the interview master, Pierre.
Well, I don't know if I'm the interview master, but if anyone ever wants to work on interviewing, I'm your guy.
So what was something that she mentioned that you were like, oh yeah, I'm glad she picked that up, or that was something new?
Well, something that really stuck out to me was where she was at beforehand. And I guess not even necessarily, well, yeah, she talked about her resume, right? That was the first thing we worked on. And she's like, all right, I'm getting my interviews. Like, I'm confident with this. And then she got into those interviews and it was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right. So we say this in our office all the time. The resume can get you that interview, but the interview is what gets you the job. So when she hit that realization of, oh, I need to be working on this, people have to be in that state of mind in order to take what we talk about seriously.
That's a really good point. Yeah. It's you need to be ready to do it. And I thought it was interesting when she said, that when she was answering questions, she realized, okay, the employer they have an answer that they are looking for. And I don't know what that is.
Right.
It feels like a secret language a little bit. And I think it sounds like, she had some really good tips, Pierre, on how to help try to predict what some of those questions were and therefore maybe what answers they're looking for by looking at the job description really carefully and using that to make predictions and just doing all the research, kind of what you're talking about, Pierre, with your communication of, you do this research on the company and on the career but all of that is super helpful to kind of communicate back in your answers in an interview.
Yeah, I think she mentioned too, she would use that job description and write out questions or scenarios of what she could potentially be asked. And I was like, yes, that is a great idea.
Definitely.
Yeah, we get so caught up with the job description at the early part of the application, and then we put it off to the side and forget about it. No, use that as that core tool throughout the entire process.
And she said that it would help her structure her answers and her thoughts. So I think that'll be very helpful for the listeners to also do that when they're preparing for an interview.
Definitely. And I think, too, the other part of that really hit me was when she talked about how doing the career-ready process and kind of going through the resume and all of the preparation helped her explore herself, and that came out in her answers as well. It helped her feel more confident in her answers. And what really hit me too was that career change part where, I used to be an educator as well, and that is an identity. And so when you're changing to something different, anyways, just the idea that in doing the career ready, like I said, process, that you actually are learning about yourself in that. Like, these are the skills that I not only am good at, but I enjoy doing. And, I always say, what are things that when you're doing them at your job, you love doing them, or that people tell you do really well, then those are the things to emphasize in your answers when you're doing that interview.
Yeah, and I think we see this a lot with, not just the educators that are changing careers, but anytime someone's doing a career change, it's like, well, I'm not qualified to do anything. I've been doing this for so long. But then once we start talking about those transferable skills, because that's what Hilary was talking about, was those transferable skills, realizing that I have these other abilities that I can be moving forward with. And once you're at that point, yes, it is hard to change that identity because we do find that identity in our work, but that's not who we are singularly, at least. So we can really move forward once we accept that.
Yeah, absolutely. How about for you, Michelle? Anything else that stood out to you as far as I guess towards the end, I was wondering, do you eat bananas before going on an interview?
And not before going on an interview, but during breakfast time and stuff. No, but yeah, I mean, I really like her snack idea. I am also a snack person, so I just really loved how she talked about taking care of her well-being because you want to be presentable during that interview. So having snacks on hand, making sure that you have all the materials you need, like the job description, a pen, tissues. You never know what you're going to need for that day. But yeah, just making sure that you're taking care of yourself, getting a good night's rest.
Yes.
So important. So I love that she said that. And then also at the end, I think just her positive self-talk was very uplifting and motivational. And I kind of mentioned this during the interview too, but just recognizing and realizing that you got to that point of the interview, and again, you should be proud that you got that far. That means the employer thought that you were a great candidate and they wanted to hear more from you. So I liked that she mentioned those things.
I think that's a good thing to remember, that they wouldn't have brought you in for an interview if they didn't see something in you that they were interested in. So like you were saying, Pierre, it's like, I'm not qualified for this. They wouldn't be bringing you in to interview if they didn't think that you were. And I think I just had this conversation with some people this weekend, actually, that idea of you have no control. She said that you have no control in the outcome. And there are so many things internal going on with any given job that just because you don't get something doesn't mean for sure that you interviewed poorly, right? I mean, that doesn't mean you don't always keep working on making things better, but, it's just kind of building that in and knowing that it's not necessarily a reflection of you or your worth.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you all have any additional tips? I don't know if you wanted to share those, but.
Sure.
So just to start off, it's something that building off of something that she said. So she's talking about finding the fit on both sides, right?
Yes.
When you enter an interview and realize that you do have power as well, right? This isn't the end all be all.
Right.
It really helps you control your nerves more. If you're going in there and saying, okay, they're deciding my future, they're deciding if I'm a good fit for here, then you're giving up a lot of that ownership. But if you go in there knowing that, hey, I'm asking questions too, I'm finding out, is this where I want to be? You become more confident, which lets you control your nerves.
I also think we forget sometimes that interviewers are people. They may have similar interests as you, or they have a family like you, or you know what I mean? Me personally, I just forget that they're people and I'm just having a conversation with another person.
Yeah, that is a really, really good point, Michelle. I always say too, it's you want to be yourself in an interview. Now, of course, it's the first date version of yourself, right? We want to not let it all out. But, if you can't pretend, don't go in there and just pretend that you're this perfect person or, talk differently than you normally would talk, because if you get the job, you can't not be yourself, because it is you want them to accept you as yourself and your personality. And it just could be that it's not a good fit. So it's there's been times where I have an interview and I am me, and if it's not a good vibe or whatever you want to say, then it's not good for them and it's not good for me. Right. So I kind of want to do that. Another tip I was just going to say really quick as far as nerves is do that little bit of planning ahead of time to know who are you interviewing with, when is it happening, where is it happening, how, answer all those questions. It is okay when if a recruiter calls you or sends you an email asking to schedule an interview, if they don't say, ask who you're interviewing with. Ask how long it'll be, where it'll be. Just confirm all of that. Plan your directions out if you have to drive somewhere. If it's online, make sure you test out all of your your stuff. And just doing all of that is, as you kind of like what you're saying earlier, yes, it's professionalism, but it's also like calming yourself so that you can do that positive visualization and just not have to worry about that part of it.
Yeah, I know one of my clients I was working with, they had a grad school interview and they just did that. They drove to the school, made sure they could locate the building and everything, and that helped them feel better about the process. So that's a really good point.
Awesome. Well, I get great interview. She did a great job, and I think it was good to hear from someone who's just been through a career change. And
yeah, I think it's going to help a lot of our listeners. So thank you all for your thoughts too.
So that actually is a good lead-in to our listener question for today. I didn't know that was going to happen. I thought our listener question was going to be just kind of like an off-topic thing. But remember, you can send us your question at careerpodcast@cod.edu or on social media at COD Career Center. So our question today is, I have been working at a retail store for the last few years. With everything going on, I have not worked the last month, but I will be returning soon. When I revise my resume, do I have to show the unemployment gap? So as with many answers, it depends. So if you were just kind of like laid off for a month, or they just kind of put you on like a furlough, but you're going back to work at the exact same place, I wouldn't worry about including that on a resume. Like, you don't need to say, like, you know, have like a gap on your resume with a start and end date with like a month. But, you know, if you're going on to a new job, that's a little different, right? So if it's only been maybe like, I don't know, 1 to like 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months, then I wouldn't worry too much about having that quote unquote gap on your resume, right? So it's like, I left my job May of, 2022, and I started a new job July of 2022. That's fine. No one's going to ask questions about that. But if it's more than 5 or 6 months, then you might want to include something about what you've done during that time. So maybe you volunteered or you took a class, right? Or both, right? If it's been years because you took time off to care for family or, whatever might have happened, then it is okay. That's going to be on your resume. But the reality is, most of the time, we haven't really just been doing nothing during that time. So maybe it's putting in something in your resume about that caregiving and talking about all the work that you did with that. But it could also most likely be that you've done volunteer work, or you took classes, or you've done some things during that time. So just be sure to add that on your resume as well. And then you didn't ask about cover letter in the question, but this is also something that could be addressed on the cover letter too, just to give a little bit more context for, maybe if there was like a little bit longer of a gap, not like a years, but just like, something that was maybe more than, maybe if it was like 8 months or something. But I think kind of something to think about with this is, if you end up with a gap, right? So you lose your job or you leave your job and it starts taking you a little bit longer than you would like to find a new one, do stuff. So volunteer, right? Take a class, do something so that, when you're in an interview, you can say that, while I've been doing my job search, I've been doing these other things to help improve my skills. Anything you guys want to add to that one?
I just think it's, like you said, it's a great idea to start doing things like volunteering and just to build those skills and to show them that you're not just at home.
Right.
So I do like that. And I tell a lot of my clients that too. Like, if there is a gap, you need to show what you've been doing during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just to throw it out there, on LinkedIn, it's still pretty new, but it's been around for a while, or I don't know, however you want to measure it. You can now do a career break on your LinkedIn profile. So being involved, extremely important. Documenting it, being set to talk about how you were involved. Even LinkedIn is recognizing, hey, this happens, so let's make sure people have a way to communicate this.
Absolutely. And I always say too, you know what, if you took off some years because you had to care for a family member or whatever was happening, or you were ill or any of those things, if an employer is really like not okay with that, then, well, they're probably not someone you want to work for. So it's time to move on to the next one.
So thanks to all of our listeners, and special thanks again to Hilary Chapa for joining us on the podcast. We hope you feel prepared to utilize the information that we shared today to help you better prepare for future interviews. Be sure to join us for our next episode as we talk about student and community involvement to help prepare for your future.